A very good evening and welcome to The Big Picture, where today we're taking a closer look at External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj's visit to Moscow. She is on a three-day visit to participate in the annual India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission meeting. She will also be discussing key strategic issues, including space, defense, energy and trade with her Russian counterpart. But this is also an opportunity to interact with the Russian government at the highest level to draw up an ambitious agenda for the Modi-Putin summit later this year. Well, joining us today to discuss this, we have in studio Amar who is a former secretary at the Ministry of External Affairs. We also have Professor Ajay Kumar Patnaik, who's at the Center for Russian and Central Asian Studies at JNU, joining us, of course, in studio as well. If I could start with you, Mr. Amarnath Sushma Swaraj today, of course, saying that statement that, Russia is India's tried and tested true friend. What do you think that signifies?
There is no doubt about that. Russia has not only been our tried and tested friend, but a long-term friend. Every time...
But having to justify it, having to make that statement, does it indicate some strained ties in the recent past?
There is a common misperception that in the last few years, India's foreign policy may have slightly veered around a more kind of pro-Western stance. But that is not entirely true, because even in the olden days, when our relations with Europe particularly were excellent, we had very good relations with the former Soviet Union and now the Russian Federation. So I think what she is doing is to merely reiterate at this point of time the very specific fulcrum place that Russia enjoys in our international exposure. And that is not only because of our very close and cordial relations and mutually beneficial relationship, but also because in the changed context in the world order today, there are synergies which Russia and India are trying to work out so that we can work together in shaping a world order which is reflective of the contemporary realities.
Absolutely. And Professor, give us an idea really of what we're talking about, the change, the dynamics in the world order, and in what way is India, of course, trying to balance that very obviously with a US and also with the Russia. In the past year, ever since we had that summit meeting of both leaders, Modi and Putin, a lot has changed in the world order, a lot has changed as far as, Russia has been in the eye of the storm for various reasons, of course, and the US, of course, has been very vocal about its involvement in Ukraine, about what's happening in Syria as well. Do you think that, of course, weighs on India's mind as well?
You see, so far as my understanding goes, this privileged partnership has reached a point where there is a breakthrough possible, especially in our vision of the global order. Russia is now taking steps at the global level, which it was reluctant to do for a long time, like in Syria, for example. That has created more and more opportunities for really seeing a different kind of global order than that existed since the bombing of, say, Iraq, and subsequently Libya and other countries. So there is a opening available now, and I don't think India is in a very difficult situation, by the way, because we both agree that there should be a multipolar world order. We mean by multipolar world order that there will be multiple poles around the world, and no country should be bound by a single pole. No country should be dependent on a single power. The purpose of this is that the dependence should be less on any great power. Now, if Russia and India, they succeed in achieving that kind of a global order, where there will be multiple poles, then the space for choosing, the space for negotiations opens up. So it doesn't mean that Russia succeeding means that we could go close to Russia and don't go close to US. The precise meaning of multipolar world order is we have multiple players to choose from depending on the context, political, cultural, economic. Some powers could be economic powers, for example, Germany or Japan. So it doesn't mean that we give up those kind of powers to go close to Russia. This is not the vision of a multipolar world order. So both powers have their own relationships. For example, Russia is moving much closer to China.
Yes.
India has moved closer to US, but that doesn't deter them for going for a multipolar world order, knowing that this is precisely what they want. They don't want just to be in one relationship, you know, that India and Russia.
But, you know, that's also another thing that we do find a lot of, you know, international affairs experts saying that this relationship has lasted so long that in a way they're kind of taking each other for granted. And that in itself is causing those strains, perhaps. We're in fact joined by senior journalist Siddharth Varadarajan as well on the phone line. Siddharth, would you agree to that India and Russia, their ties, you know, going on since the 60s, but somehow they've kind of taken each other for granted in the whole process. They've made new friends, but that relationship that they had between, you know, these two countries, somehow it's been strained.
Well, the global context has changed. What the former Soviet Union meant for India at a time of bipolar division during the Cold War, when India was dealing with a very specific set of problems. You know, those circumstances have changed, and you know, the fact is that there are more big powers who are courting or who want India's friendship. And as your other guests were saying, we are today in a position where India doesn't have to choose between closer ties with Russia or closer ties with America. So I think that, you know, the world order has undergone a change. India's regional and global circumstances have changed. But I want to underline how the sharpening division, or the sharpening of contradictions between Moscow and Washington right now, and we see this not only in Ukraine but in Syria, poses a challenge for India, I think, because there will be an expectation both from the Russian side and the American side that India will, in some sense, you know, bat for them or represent, or in a way, you know, pay attention to their concerns. And I think here there'll be need for some kind of a balancing act. The fact is that Russia has now, after perhaps dithering for a year or two, come out firmly in defense of the government of Syria and has militarily gotten involved in the fight against ISIS. And, you know, the United States, which on paper says it opposes ISIS, is very unhappy about this. And this has created a new situation in Syria and, I dare say, in the whole of West Asia. So there is, you know, Syria will be looking for India, which has taken a firm stand against ISIS, to support what it is doing. And if India were to say anything on this, this would obviously be quite upsetting or irritating for the Americans. So I think this is a challenging time for Indian diplomacy. The theory that you can improve relations with all big powers simultaneously worked fine as long as relations between Moscow and Washington, or Beijing and Washington, were on a relatively even keel. But things look like they're deteriorating on those fronts.
Absolutely. And, you know, talking about the ISIS challenge, of course, there is, of course, the Taliban challenge, which we are, of course, seeing in Afghanistan as well. We do see, of course, Moscow supporting, in a sense, Pakistan and Afghanistan's efforts really to bring Taliban on the talking table, you know, try and negotiate things. And is that a worry for India, you know, in that whole picture, in that whole scenario, trying to maintain, bring peace and stability in Afghanistan, but India somehow not really a big partner, at least in that, you know, in that dynamic?
I think too much may be read into this kind of an analysis. The fact is that both countries are pursuing a fairly nuanced foreign policy now. It doesn't mean that on every issue we have identical views.
Yes.
But it does mean that we have a very large area of convergence in the emerging configuration of global order, in which we see opportunities of working together to our mutual advantage. It is true that we don't have identical positions on, for example, Syria, or for that matter on Afghanistan and Taliban. But it is equally true that we are both keen to develop a world order in which there is no monopoly of one or two or a group of countries who, for historical reasons, have captured pivotal positions in global decision makings. The BRICS arrangement, in which both India and Russia are partners, is one such arrangement which is a kind of a message to the international trading community and economic leadership of the world that, look, we have come of age. And with India, Russia, China, Brazil and South Africa on the same table, you cannot treat us lightly.
Yes.
And the BRICS Bank and the other progress which has been achieved. So likewise, there is also a trilateral forum in which India, Russia and China are sitting together. I think these are all very important straws in the wind at this point of time, but they could be indicative of a nuanced shift in the way we look at each other and in the way we wish to pursue our common agenda where there is convergence for our mutual advantage. I think that is the purpose of the strategic dialogue which Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj is going to pursue in Moscow this time, apart from, of course, preparing for the summit meeting perhaps at the end of the year.
Yes, yes, that's right. And you know, something that we would be looking forward to, of course, would also be trade, because we do know that India's trade turnover, especially you know, with the US and the Europe, is about $100 billion each, if I'm looking at the figures correctly. But our two-way trade with Russia still, you know, at a $10 billion margin there. You know, in that sense, if you look at it, with Prime Minister Modi, of course, focusing on trade ties so much with various countries now, is that something that can be picked up?
Well, I'm not so worried about that front so much. If you look at the, continuing from the discussion that you were having with him, if you look at the geopolitical landscape today, now there is a lot of convergence happening. See, with the Americans reducing their troop presence in Afghanistan, you see, it's countries like India, China, Russia, they are trying to stabilize, they have to stabilize this country and the region. And this is the landscape in which we are talking about India-Russia, partnership or strategic partnership. If you look at the Russian initiative and other steps that they took to bring India into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it's a big boost for a sort of concert of powers, around Afghanistan, where you have in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, China, Russia, India, Pakistan, Central Asian countries. So this is so far as geopolitics goes. So far as economics goes, yes, it's a paradox. But sometimes you have countries which have best of economic relationships, very high levels of trade, but there is no political convergence. US, China, you could discuss. Even India and China, you have a lot of trade. Why with Russia we have to have a different kind of vision? There is a Chinese Silk Road strategy happening already, it's being initiated. This will boost the East-West trade of China, reviving the ancient market to Europe. Now, what the Indian policymakers are visualizing, probably, they are just putting into place a vision where India would have its own Silk Road strategy, where we are focusing on two corridors. International North-South Transport Corridor through Iran that will go to Russia, and the other is through Chabahar Port, which is also in Iran, but through Afghanistan we link to Eurasia. So there is a new vision that is happening. So we have a lot of investments that could happen in future because we got the iron ore, mining, competitions, biddings. So how to evacuate that? Then from there we have already built highways from Jarans to Delaram, and from there to 3 Central Asian countries on the border of Afghanistan. So we are also trying to sign a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with the customs union of Russia, Belarus and Kazakhstan. Once that happens, we will have a very large market, not small Central Asian markets, a market of about 175 million people, very rich per capita income countries like Russia and Kazakhstan. See, and then we will have 2 access routes, both through Iran, one through Afghanistan and one through Central Asia.
So what
that is the kind of Silk Road vision we are looking at. And that is where we should focus. Fortunately, they have dry runs through this route. Our Minister for Transport, he has gone there, shipping and transport, speaking about Chabahar. So the focus is now back on this route. And once this happens, you would find India's look north policy, where you look at the Eurasia and integrate with Eurasia, South Asia, Eurasia, not the US strategy of, Greater Central Asia or the Chinese Silk Road strategy, East-West connection.
Yes, yes.
We want a different kind of vision. We should have a different kind of vision.
All right. Siddharth, would you agree with that? Is that the kind, getting in more players? Because earlier we saw India and Russia, especially with defense deals, they were the only ones who were dealing with each other, at least as far as India is concerned. But now, on various other fronts, we have these other multi-players as well. And now with the Modi government, of course, focusing on Make in India, Skill India, Digital India, these are some initiatives he's looking at. Is that something that Russia is also excited about? All right, we seem to have lost that link with Siddharth Varadarajan. Hopefully, we'll try and get in touch with him. But talking, of course, of what we can look forward to, apart from, Mrs. Swaraj's visit there as well. She's, of course, trying to, build up that agenda, really. But is that something we can be looking forward to? Is Russia looking excited into these initiatives that, of course, the Modi government is trying to initiate?
Perhaps some more work needs to be done. But there is definitely interest in technological collaboration. In fact, two areas which have been identified for even Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj's visit, one is space and one is energy and related areas. Now, these are all areas where Russia has a lot to offer. And India is in a position today to share technology with, we have developed ourselves in both these areas. So I think these are again some areas, selected areas of convergence. Now, let me just move aside for a minute and tell you that in my own view, there is greater pragmatism in this relationship today than there ever was. Both countries realize that today the world is a different place. It is not the world of the Cold War era where we were tied in an alliance with each other through the treaty which we had. Today we have the freedom to choose not only our own paths to development, but strategic alliances and partnerships. Therefore, the Russian Federation is not averse to India's good and growing relations with the West, just as we are mindful of Russia's growing and close relations with China, which we don't see necessarily as impinging on our own interests.
Or as a threat, in fact.
Or as a threat.
Yes.
And likewise,
in
I
fact,
think
so I've been told that we're in fact joined on the phone line by Sanjay Kapoor, editor of Hard News as well. Sanjay, we're discussing, of course, India and Russia ties. Are we seeing a strain, really? Is that something that, the Modi-Putin summit eventually later this year can, of course, try to work out? What, according to you, are the challenges that you see between within the ties at this point of time?
I think a great amount of effort would be needed to somehow bring the ties at the level of what it was some years ago. There have been certain, you can say, misgivings which exist between the two countries. And I think Russia would be looking for some kind of endorsement from India when it comes to their presence in Syria. They would say that, India has been supported by them in the membership to the Shanghai Cooperation. And Shanghai Cooperation is basically an anti-terror Asian NATO organization. So there I think they would be looking at some kind of endorsement because they would like to know what is in our reckoning is our understanding of the Islamic State, the threat it constitutes, and do they see the Russian intervention as something that will neuter the Islamic State? So I think that would be a very core issue where they would be looking for an endorsement from an old ally like India. India has been quiet on this. They have not really spoken out because it has sensitivities. So I think they would probably be expected to step out. I don't know what Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj would say during this meeting with Lavrov or what has really happened. Details haven't really come out at the last time I saw about India's stand on Syria. Then there is the other issue of enlarging trade with Russia, which is by and large limited to defense, and as you rightly pointed out, it's just about $10 billion. The Russians largely feel quite ignored by India deciding to diversify its supply of weapon system. It buys from the US, from Israel, and from others. And they think they still have plenty of hardware there which will suit India's purpose. In fact, the manner in which they have used their enormous firepower and military power in Russia, in Syria, in a certain way showcases what they have. So I'm sure they would try to push in some of the hardware they think India needs. I'm told that India would be buying helicopters in the coming days. So there is a relationship both at the level of political endorsement, the nature of the Shanghai cooperation. We are going to hold the summit next year, so there will be certain kind of expectation that they would be from Russia, and Russia's close ties with China is a factor which always weighs on us. We aren't very sure how it is going, and then on top of that, you have a defense cooperation between Russia and Pakistan. So, in a certain way, I think the summit between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Putin, when it takes place, would, I think, clarify many of these issues.
Yes, and talking about the trade and especially about defense deals, Mr. Ram, if I could come to you, barring the upcoming 11 billion contract that we have on the 5th generation fighter aircraft, that program with Russia, there are no new specific plans really that both the countries have on new Russian arms. Do you think that is also could that be a factor? Could that be a factor of tension between both countries? Even though, like you pointed out, it's a good scenario to have multiple players. But still, as a country who has been dealing with India on defense trade for so long, would they like to have that, one-upmanship still?
I don't believe it is an irritant. It certainly is an area where both sides would like to explore possibilities of getting world-class, cutting-edge equipment and technology from Russia, just as India is getting it from Europe and the United States. But I don't think it is an irritant. In any case, trade between the two countries will have to be based on normal commercial considerations. It is no longer the rupee trade agreement that we used to talk about in the late 80s and 70s. Today it is all on commercial terms.
Yes.
So if the Russians do feel that there is some equipment which they can sell to India, which is top of the line, then obviously India would be interested, because India has always looked at Russia as the first choice for our defense equipment. The fact that we are going elsewhere today does not mean that Russia has become the second preferred destination for India. It only means that we are exercising our freedom to get the best from wherever we can get at the most competitive commercial terms.
Yes.
This the Russians do understand. So I don't think it's an irritant. But certainly the Russians would like to sell to us helicopters to start with, particularly during the course of this visit. This may be an area of discussion between the two countries. I'm not sure whether space is, of course, another area where negotiations are being held for further collaboration. I'm not sure if there is going to be any specific discussion on any new weapons purchases from Russia during this particular visit. But then we'll have to wait more details when they come.
Absolutely. And Professor, apart from the ties between the both countries, whether it's trade, space, all those details, Prime Minister Modi is also somebody who has been able to establish a bonhomie with a lot of, world leaders. Let's not even start about how friendly relations are, of course, on a one-on-one level with the US President. Recently, we also saw it with Angela Merkel. We also saw, even with Japanese President Shinzo Abe, a very unlikely, bonhomie that we saw between them. But that's not something, that warmth was not something that was very evident, during the meetings that we see between Modi and Putin. Is that something, of course, world leaders look at? It's obviously not a factor to, establish ties. But is that something also that plays there?
I don't know, because at some level you could say that Indians, have a love for the Western leaders and glamorize them. And Putin is that way a cool chap, so he's not given into this kind of very
selfie mania,
that expression of affection, and you could say that just a stern kind of personality, very, very focused, and resolved to do something. He does it, and I think they will gel well without this body language.
Yes,
because on certain fronts, Putin is delivering. On the terrorism front, he is delivering.
Yes.
So far as India is concerned, we may openly support or not. In Syrian issue especially, let me point out two issues which are favorable to India. That is India's principle in general. We do not want governments to be changed by outside forces.
Yes.
That has never been India's position. Without authorization of the United Nations, no country should be bombed, or by violating all international law without being invited by a government.
Which is perhaps on the Ukraine issue as
government.
well. They did not agree with those sanctions that, of course, the West was trying to
So this is
impose.
one area where India and Russia, India will find a lot of support for Russia within the country also. And secondly is ISIS, you know, they're fighting them, really fighting them, not symbolic fighting. This is the real fighting happening, and the ground troops are going also.
All right. Gentlemen, that's about the time I have here on The Big Picture. Thank you so much for joining us on this story. We'll, of course, be looking forward to what comes out of those meetings between Sushma Swaraj and Sergei Lavrov, and eventually that summit meeting that we're looking forward to later this year. That's it on The Big Picture. Thanks so much for joining us.